Dan is a very accomplished leader. He's been working in the leadership space for a long time. He's been training people in leadership. He is also, and I can tell you this from personal experience, an incredibly astute interviewer. I have been on one of Dan's podcasts and we went on for 2 hours. He has the ability to dig in to where your strengths are, where your challenges are. And as a leader, that is a really important skill. And supremely over all of this is his raison d'etre of gratitude. And it saved his life. Let's hear about that story from Dan. Sir, over to you.
There are moments that I've discovered in life where we're on the edge, where we look up and we look back and maybe we look forward if we're lucky. And those moments, they freeze a little bit in time. For me, the moment that is stuck as an inflection point, I think each of us get a few of those in our lives, and a lot of times we'll see them afterward. In this case, I was pretty clearly able to see it in the moment. The one that sticks for me is the moment of my first heart attack. I was laying on the operating table. I thought I was going to die. I heard the beep, beep, beep that you want to hear, right? That's the good sound. So you want to hear that? That means some things are going well. You're still alive. But I thought I was going to die. I looked up at the doctors and they reached over and they handed me a piece of paper. And they said, "We need you to sign this." And I, in my groggy and very pained state, looked down at it and it said, "You could die." And now it said it in a few more words than that, but it was very clear. This is risky. You could die. The doctors looked at me and they're like, "Yeah, 60% of people die from this." I'm like, whoa. I flashed back to an hour earlier when I'd had to ask my wife to bring my son to the hospital to say goodbye to me. When I'd had to do the thing that as a parent, I even tear up thinking of now, I'd had to say what I thought would be the last words that my kid ever heard from me. And I told Bryce that I loved her, and I told her that I was grateful. And it wasn't just words. There's raw in that moment, and you guys can hear it from me now. There's raw that doesn't go away from that moment. And you may be thinking, Dan, you're about to tell us the transformation that happened after your heart attack. No, that's a story for another time. What I'm about to tell you is the transformation that happened before my heart attack. The transformation that allowed me to live through that heart attack that, as a side note, was the same exact thing that had killed my mother 21 years earlier, within a week and a half of the same exact age I was when laying on that table. You see, it was gratitude. And what I was shocked by in that moment was how washed over I was with gratitude. Yes, I had fear. I mean, I was afraid, of course. We feel that, but it wasn't like the rest of my life. It was so very different. And if I can just connect this thread for you today, that when you live in gratitude, and not just in the platitudes, but the actual moment and life and existence of gratitude, everything changes. For me, I laid there and I was reticent. I was afraid. I had all those things, but they were really shoved to the background with a peace that came from a gratitude that surpassed any understanding that I'd ever had before, that was never true. You see, I grew up living in fear and insecurity, fueled by jealousy and all of those things. I grew up in poverty. I grew up hidden from my father for 6 years. I grew up with my mother selling herself so that we had rent. I grew up wishing that I had the things of others, living and crushed by the comparison that I looked at in everyone else. I grew up the furthest from gratitude. I grew up driven to prove that I could deserve, or I could earn, or I could have whatever. And about 6 years ago, 7 now, I guess, I recognized that I wasn't fulfilled. I recognized that the suicide attempts that I'd survived were cries and learnings and pain. but that there was more. And so I quit my corporate job that I'd spent 25 years earning, walked away from hundreds of thousands a year to go to zero and start my own company. But more importantly, I started doing the real work. And I didn't know what the real work is. I say that now. I'm like, I did the deep work. Like, I had some idea what that meant. And I figured it out as I went, which was cool. And I believe that leaders are learners, leaders are readers. I found mentors and I asked a lot of questions. But what I ended up coming back to is my number one gift in the world, the one thing that I'm best at, which is synthesis. I can see things from 100 different places, pick a little piece from each and make something just better than any of them that I can understand it. And my second gift is to be able to turn around and train it and share it in a way that connects and helps people. Share the principle that's true everywhere and the practical that hits you right in the eyes, right? Or that gets you right where you need it to bring you forward. Well, my before picture, you've heard a little bit about. During, I was still judgmental. I was still jealous. I'd love to tell you, oh yeah, I started personal development. It was all better. No problem. It was good. I just flipped the switch. No, guys, it's a dial, right? I was like, now I'm like 10% grateful and like 90% bitter and jealous. Now I'm like 20 and 30. Well, by the time we got to the spot of my heart attack a couple years ago, I had gotten that dial into a really good place, but I had no idea how deep it had sunk. So how did I do it? And what was the change? Well, here's a couple of things. First of all, take this understanding. Deep work is best done through simple understandings and habits. Deep work isn't done by just saying, I'm going to dive deep into everything, and that's where it all is. Deep work is consistency over time of simple things. So let me give you a few simple ones to take that have stuck with me, that have changed my life and have changed thousands that I've worked with. Here, and these, by the way, we talk about stealing things, right? That's the best writers do. It's what a lot of the best speakers do. Here's one. Life is 10% what happens and 90% how we respond. Taking that from Charles Swindoll and some others. The depth of this, if you really get into it, is so much. Our response is everything. So here's the question I have for you about that one. Why would you ever go to Vegas and bet on 10%? If you walked into Vegas and you had to put all your chips down on one thing in your life, would you bet it on the 90 or the 10? I bet it on the 90. Why? Also because, not for nothing, I have 100% control over me. So I actually have 100% control of the 90. And I don't have to worry about the 10. The 10 is largely irrelevant. So when I laid there and I'd had a heart attack, that wasn't in my control, but that was the 10%. The 90 was like, thank you, doctor. I'm grateful for everything that's going on. And the corollary to this is the corollary that I hadn't heard someone else say, but I want to give you that will empower you if you can just put your arms around it. And that is that life in the worst moment, on the darkest day, in the darkest hour of your life, and laying there on that operating table was one of mine, is objectively 90% good. Everything in your life, 90% of it is good, even in that moment. And for some reason, I'd done the work so much that that's what washed over me. I was like, oh my gosh, in this moment, I live near one of the best heart hospitals in the world. I have the most amazing kid there ever was. I've got food in my freezer at home. If I live, I get to go home and enjoy it. If I don't, I've been able to do these things, and I've been able to meet amazing people all over the world. That's powerful. 90% of my things, if I objectively made a list right at that moment, on the con side, heart attack, might die. Okay. But on the pro side, there's like 400 things. How can I be upset and not grateful right in the face of that? And it had washed into me. So remember that. Your darkest day, your darkest hour, life is 90% good. Here's the third. Shift from impatience to eagerness. And I'll give you just a little bit on this moment. Impatience is inward and downward. Impatience is about I deserve and entitlement and all of those things. And people told me, Dan, be more patient. Well, that's fine, but being more patient sucks if you don't have something to replace it with. Any behavior you're going to change, you have to have a replacement. The replacement here is eagerness. Eagerness is upward and outward. It is forward. It is about the journey. It is about the not being wishful for the future or wistful for the past, but living where you are and being grateful where you are. Shift to eagerness from impatience and your life changes completely. And here's the last one. Do a gratitude practice. Take a physical gratitude practice and write down 3 non-repetitive things every morning. 2.5 weeks later, something really cool happens. Your brain chemistry actually changes. And even though you only spent 2 minutes doing that, as long as you did it at least 2.5 weeks in a row, then 12 hours later, you'll still be grateful. And you can't be grateful and bitter or grateful and angry or grateful and jealous at the same time. So take your time and write that down. Non-repetitive. In several years, I've never repeated one and written down or typed. Make sure you do that, and you will change everything about what you do. So where are you? Are you insecure, judgmental, terrified, where I was early? That's okay. Practice. Are you confident and clear? Shift your mind. Are you mastering everything? Continue to grow. But here's the question. Will you be happy with the message that comes to you after the beep, beep, beep?